Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. We are studying them chronologically through all four Gospels. And today we are looking at Jesus teaching, or teaches with authority. And this comes from Mark 1, 21 through 28, and Luke 4, verses 31 through 37. And what we see here is Jesus in verse 21. Mainly, I'm going to come out of Mark here because, Luke doesn't really, their stories are very similar. But in Mark 21 and 22, we see that Jesus and they were in Capernaum, and his followers were in Capernaum, and the Sabbath day came, and he went into the synagogue and began to teach. And this was a common practice. The temple of Jerusalem was so far away that they would build synagogues in these local towns, and they would serve as places of worship and as schools for teaching and education. During the week, the Jewish boys were taught the Old Testament there. In the Jewish law or the Old Testament law and the Jewish religion. But unfortunately, girls were not allowed to attend. The girls were not allowed to learn the law. They weren't allowed to learn the Old Testament. They really weren't. Rabbis were not allowed to teach women at all. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit because that's something Jesus didn't do. He actually taught women. We'll see that. Um, and because there was no usually prominent or permanent rabbi or teacher, they would have guest speakers. Kind of think of like small churches, small rural churches that a lot of times have guest speakers or rotate speakers through. These small towns would do the same thing, and so Jesus was there teaching, and as he taught, it was different than how the scribes and the Pharisees would teach because most of their teaching was just repeating scripture. And I don't know if anyone's experienced that, but if you've ever gone and listened to someone teach and they just get up there and they read to you, right, or they just kind of tell you a little bit of scripture here and there and read to you, then there's not a lot of authority in their teaching, and a lot of times, I've been there, and I don't mean to be judgmental, but it's like I can read to myself, and so, but they were scribes, and this is what they were known for: memorizing and copying and writing down scripture, and so they were really good at just kind of reading it, but not with a lot of authority. So Jesus teaching, he taught with authority because he knew it, he wrote it, right, and so it was amazing to them. They were amazed because of how he acted as he taught. It was not just a, hey, I'm going to read this to you. He taught about it, and it was with an authoritative stance. And so the people were amazed. So while he's doing this, suddenly a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit, a demon, however you want to, whatever translation translates that, and screams out at him, and calls him Jesus of Nazareth. Why are you interfering with us? Have you come to destroy us? I know you're the Holy One of God. And so, and I want to look at this in verse 23 and 24. I want to dive. So, history has really done some different numbers with demon and possession, evil spirits, and that kind of thing. Some people dismiss all accounts of demon possession as just a primitive way of describing mental illness, right? And so through and this is we got somewhere where we got to be careful because throughout history, mental illness sometimes has been attributed to demon possession, and and vice versa. And so we've got to be careful how we look at this. And then one of the things that we taught when we look at demon possession, we don't see a lot about demon possession, especially in the Old Testament, but it definitely seems to be very active in the New Testament. And I think that parallels with Jesus being there as to why it became so active. And we'll dive into that. I think we're actually going to probably end up doing a study on angels and demons and looking a little bit deeper into those. One of the things I will point out here is demons were not created by Satan. There are some people who think, well, that the devil created the demons, and no, they were actually the ones. They were angels who joined Satan or Lucifer, however whatever word you want to use for that, in the fall, right? And so they were part of the fall. They were the ones that rebelled, and so demons were just angels that fell. And the evil spirit knew at once that Jesus was the Holy One sent from God. I mean, there was no doubt this demon, had possessed this man, knew immediately who Jesus was. And so even further established Jesus' credentials and who he was. And one of the things I wanted to point out here too is, a man that was possessed by a demon was in the synagogue where Jesus was teaching. All right, so he made it into their place of worship. A fallen angel, a demon, had made it into their place of worship and verbally abused Jesus. And so I want to use this as a point to point out it's naive for us to think that, you know, that we're sheltered from evil even in the church, right? And you know, Satan's more than happy to invade the churches. In fact, he's probably ecstatic to get into churches because anything he can do to make the church look bad is a win for him. And unfortunately, and I say this, and I'm not trying to be too negative, I am being realistic. Unfortunately, here lately, it seems like he is getting more and more of a foothold in a lot of our churches. We're seeing a lot of abuses in leadership and different things, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of people leave the church, because we are seeing so many, you know, headlines and big major things of these horrible abuses that are happening. And in some cases, you know, especially around sexual abuse, you're more likely to be sexually abused in a church than you are, you know, in other public forums. And so that should not be the case. And so we've got to do a better job as Christians in, you know, we can't let a few bad, you know, rotten eggs, however you want to use that, a few bad people ruin the whole thing. And this is where I'm adamant, because I've seen it so many times. I've seen it a lot where a couple people who have bad intentions end up in power and positions of authority. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of really good people who refuse to stand up. And that's where we have got to make sure as Christians that if we see that happening, we cannot put our head in the sand. We cannot stick our heads in the sand. We've got to stand up. So, you know, even sometimes, even if that is person in a position of authority, like an elder, like a preacher, right, or a pastor, whatever your background is, you know, if you see something that's wrong, then you've got to talk to that, and you can't allow it. And unfortunately, we too often we've been taught that, oh well, this person's an elder or this person's a pastor, and so, you know, God put them in this. We shouldn't challenge their authority. We shouldn't challenge them because they're appointed by God. That's not how that works. And so I say that side thing because, you know, I mean, I was born and raised in the church. I love the church, and I love the church in its many forms. But here lately, the church has been getting a really bad rap, you know, and it's because of a few bad people. And so I hate for someone who may be coming along new, to see this and be like, oh well, look at how all these churches. That's not how all the churches are, but there are more than there should be. And that's typically, I'll be honest with you, most of the time when something like that happens, it's because the church members refuse to stand up and do something about it. And so I'm not trying to be hard on us, but I'm just saying we've got to do that, because that's the only way we're going to clean out those people who do have evil intentions, who do have bad intentions, that have come to churches to make sure that we keep it clean and keep it cleared out. So anyways, I know I kind of went down a path there, but that's something that's personal to me, because as a preacher's kid, right, I've seen a lot of things, and unfortunately, abuse of power has been one of them in the church, and most of the time that was allowed to happen because people who knew what was going on didn't speak up, and so I'm a little bit passionate on that. So the last thing there is and this one may be a little bit controversial for some people, because it just depends on where your beliefs fall on this. Again, this isn't one of those salvation issues, but I honestly believe that, you know, we still see, you know, cases of demon possession or evil demons in the world today. Now they're not near as all what we saw in the New Testament. Again, I think that was because that was a different time. Jesus was there. There's some people who believe that when Jesus was resurrected, that, you know, that all evil spirits were gone. I don't believe that. I still believe they still exist. I think there's too many things there's too much evil. There's too many things that you've seen in the world. I've seen things in the world where if the person wasn't demon possessed, then I don't know what they were. I mean, and so that's my personal experiences. That's me. So I still believe that but the one thing that there is no doubt about this is that evil still permeates our world, and so we need to be fearful of that, respectful of the fact that yes, there is still evil in the world. We see it every single day, and we have to be the light to that evil. And that's where we have to understand, and that's where we understand that Jesus's power is far greater than anything Satan has out there. And this is how we know it. So we go to verse 25. All Jesus has to say is just a couple words to this demon. He says, "Be quiet, come out of that man." And at that, the evil spirit screamed through the man into convulsions, and then came out of it. Right. So Jesus basically told this demon to be quiet, shut up, and he did, and to come out, and he obeyed Jesus. And so that's the power that Jesus has over Satan and his demons. And so we see that in verse 25. Jesus didn't have to. He didn't have to shout out some magical words or say some magical scene or go through this seance or he just said, "Be quiet, come out," and that was done, and it was it. And so he spoke with the authority of God, and we have that same sort of authority behind us. And so when we're confronted with evil in this world, we need to understand that we have the same power behind us that Jesus did when it comes to that. And so finally in verse 27, amazement gripped the audience, is how, verse 27 starts out. They were amazed by what they just saw. They'd never seen anything like that in their lives. One, this man was teaching with authority. He understood the Old Testament, the law, everything that had been written. He was able to explain it to them as the person who wrote it, so he understood it completely. And then a demon shows up, a demon-possessed man shows up, and he orders this demon to be quiet and come out of this man, and it just does. It does everything. So they see this authority that Jesus has, and it just goes. And so obviously the people there were amazed at what he did. And so that's one of the things I think, and the main point of this is the first step toward conquering fear of evil is to recognize that Jesus has all authority and power. Right? He has overcome all evil, including Satan himself. We saw that, with the temptation of Jesus. He overpowered, and by overpowering death, which we're going to see, and through the resurrection, he ultimately conquered death and Satan and sin and all those things. And so we don't have to worry about that anymore, right? We have the ultimate power behind us. And so that can be hard sometimes, because honestly, you look at the world, it's a scary world. It's a scary world. There's some evil things happening in this world, and it's easy sometimes to think, man, this is just too much, and to give up. But we need to understand that we have the ultimate power. We're living in the world. The world's going to be evil. We live in it, and it's going to be around us. We just got to learn how to deal with it and confront it in a loving manner. In some ways, sometimes we just have to be direct with it. And so we have to learn how to do that. But again, I just wanted us to emphasize and look on how Jesus has his authority over everything. Jesus has authority over anything. And so we can have that same confidence in what we teach and what we look at here, and that same authority. We can teach, we can speak with authority about the things that we read and the things that we see that Jesus did. And we also can confront evil and confront things that are wicked in this world with that same sort of authority and judgment. So, again, I really appreciate everyone as y'all have been watching these videos. The comments, I really appreciate it. I encourage you to leave comments. Right, send messages. Anything that stands out, questions. Because I'm going to start a side thing here with some of the questions that have been asked, and do some side videos of common questions that people have about Christianity and Jesus and all the things that we've been studying. So we're going to do that. I highly encourage you to share these videos, please, to anyone you think would benefit from them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. You're going to see a little thing pop up at the end of the video. But if not, you can just go to our channel and subscribe there. And again, as always, I really appreciate y'all watching.